Where does your NFL team's defense rank entering the 2022 NFL season? Today, I will rank every defense in the NFL from 32 to 1. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Also, be sure to follow my social medias. They will be in the description, so make sure you go check those out. I would really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into the rankings. At number 32, the worst defense in the NFL, according to me, entering the 2022 season is unfortunately the Detroit Lions. Now, I do like what the Lions did at edge. I like Harris, and I really like Hutchinson, the pick that they made in the first round this past draft. But other than that, it's pretty weak. The linebacker position isn't very good. The safeties, Elliott and Walker, have shown some things in the past, but neither played very well last season. The cornerback core, Amani has been all right for them at times, and Okudah is still a young player who we'll see, but he hasn't shown much in the NFL. And their interior defensive line is not very strong. They have Michael Brockers there, but he is getting older and is not the force he once was, and past that, they are not very deep. The scheme is relatively unproven as well, and I'm not very high on it. So overall, the Lions defense, while I think their offense has potential, I don't think their defense is very good, and I think that's what's going to hold back this football team entering the 2022 season. I just don't see many impact makers on this unit. At number 31, I have the Seattle Seahawks defense. The Seattle Seahawks defense has certainly fallen from the Legion of Boom days. And there's not a ton to like on this defense, but I will say I like the safety position. Quandre Diggs is very good for them. And Jamal Adams, as much of a meme as he was at times last season, is still more than a starting caliber safety. He's a pretty good player. The linebacker position without Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright is lacking somewhat of an identity. I did like how Jordan Brooks played at times last season, though, so that is a good thing for them. But the cornerback position and the defensive line on both sides, as much interior and edge, is pretty lacking. And because of that, Seattle ranks lower. It wouldn't actually stun me if, I guess, the back four with the linebackers and the safeties are actually pretty decent this year. But outside of that, they are lacking. And I'm not a huge fan of the scheme either. So at number 31, the Seattle Seahawks defense. At number 30, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. The Jags defense is one that I still think is one of the worst in the league, but I can see at least them having a bit more potential than the bottom two. I like the linebacker duo of Oluokun and Lloyd. I think Oluokun's a pretty good player. He did lead the NFL in tackles. He was a bit overpaid, but he's still a pretty good player, certainly an above-average linebacker. And Devin Lloyd was a number one or number two linebacker in the draft with Nakobe Dean for me in this class. So that was a good pick, and they've got potential there for sure. The cornerback room, Griffin has had solid play in the past, as has Darius Williams, and Tyson Campbell is a very young player, so that has potential, but we haven't seen much from it so far. The defensive line, Trayvon Walker, the number one pick, paired up with Josh Allen, a pretty good edge rusher. That's a promising edge duo. The interior defensive line, though, is pretty weak, and the safety duo is weak/unproven, so that kind of lets down this defense. But even though they're at 30, I can definitely see Jacksonville being a better defense than this ranking because they do have young talent and they are fairly strong in areas. At number 29, I have the Houston Texans defense. The Texans defense is fairly deep, which I give them credit for, but they don't have a lot of star power, if any. The interior defensive line with Lopez and Collins is not very strong. Neither is the edge duo with Grenard and Okoronkwo, but they are fairly deep, especially in edge, so I give them credit for that. The cornerback trio, Stingley and Nelson on the outside with Thomas in the nickel. Thomas isn't great. Nelson has been good in spurts in the past, and Stingley is someone that I can definitely see being a defensive rookie of the year candidate, so they do get some points for me there. Petrie and Murray, though, not a great safety duo. Petrie, obviously, of course, a rookie. Murray, just not a very good starter. And the linebacker duo of Harris and Kirksey is not very strong. But Lovie Smith is a guy who has coached defense for a while, does know what he's doing, I feel. So they get some points there for scheme, which brings them up a little bit from being the absolute worst in the league, but they still are one of the worst in the NFL, coming in at number 29 defensively. At number 28, I have the Atlanta Falcons defense. The Falcons defense has a couple really awesome players, but has little to nothing after that. So they've got Grady Jarrett in the interior defensive line, who's very good to elite, but they don't have anything past him at that position. The edge position is pretty thin. I like Lorenzo Carter as kind of a versatile hybrid, do-it-all kind of player, but he hasn't really shown much in terms of the production side of things. And outside of that, they don't really have much. The cornerback position is actually very good for this team, though. Casey Hayward, top 20 guy. AJ Terrell, top 5 guy. Isaiah Oliver, before his injury last season, played pretty well in the nickel. So that's one of the better trios in the NFL, which is why I give them a 5 out of 5. But the linebacker duo, Deion Jones took a big step back last season, and Rashaan Evans just isn't very good. And the safety spot, Grant and Hawkins have both shown some promise, but they haven't shown enough for me to give them anything more than a 1 there. I like Dean Pease, though, again, kind of like the Texans with Lovie Smith. I think he's a good defensive coordinator that knows what he's doing and will make this defense a little better than its talent, but it still is one of the weaker units in the NFL. At number 27, I have the Chicago Bears defense. The Chicago Bears defense has certainly declined from years past. Now, is it the absolute worst in the league? I don't actually think so. I think the Bears defense has still some pieces. Like, they still have Eddie Jackson, who's not great, but he's not, bad. Brisker, who's unproven, but has potential at safety. Roquan Smith, one of the best linebackers in football. Jalen Johnson, who I like at corner. Robert Quinn, one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. But they are much weaker in the interior defensive line. They're much weaker at edge. They still aren't very good at safety. I do like Matt Eberflus coming in as a defensive mind. I think he's very good. He was very good for the Colts. But overall, this defense still lacks a lot, for my opinion, compared to where they were a couple years ago, and comes in at number 27. At number 26, I have another defense that has fallen off from previous years. That is the Washington Commanders defense. The Commanders defense, just entering last season, was a top 5 unit solidly in the NFL, but it has certainly fallen from that. The defensive line is still strong, especially in the middle with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, but at edge, I think they've weakened. They still have Young and Sweat, which I like, but neither of them are necessarily game breakers. And they lost a lot of depth there, which hurts them for me. The cornerback room, Fuller, Jackson, and St. Juste, not great. The linebacker and safety rooms aren't great, especially the linebacker core, which I think is pretty weak. And the scheme for them just isn't all that strong to me. So the Commanders' defense, when you look at it and when you think of it on paper, it doesn't quite match. I think most people still think of this as a pretty strong unit, but I certainly think it's declined from where it once was, and comes in for me at number 26. At number 25, I have the Arizona Cardinals defense. Another defense that I expect to regress entering the 2022 NFL season. The Cardinals defense, at least statistically, especially early last season, was really good. They still have some of those pieces. They still have Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson at safety, 2 players I really like, and it makes them one of the best safety cores in the league. But the cornerback room is pretty thin outside of Byron Murphy. The defensive line is pretty weak as well. I mean, they do have Golden, who I like, but Kennard's not very good. And the rest of it is pretty thin without Chandler Jones now. Again, J.J. Watt, good interior defensive lineman at this point, but not much past that. The linebacker duo of Collins and Simmons hasn't done much. I like the scheme, though, with Vance Joseph there. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. So this Cardinals defense has some pieces, again, but I think they've lost depth and they've lost talent, which has caused them to regress to number 25 entering the 2022 NFL season. At number 24, I have the Minnesota Vikings defense. The Vikings defense has certainly struggled in recent seasons, but I could see somewhat of a resurgence in the 2022 season. Due to some of the additions they've made, they've added Jordan Hicks at linebacker to pair with Eric Kendricks, forming one of the best linebacker duos in the league. They have also drafted Lewis Cine, my boy from Georgia, one of the best Georgia defenders last season on a historically great college defense, pairing him with Harrison Smith at safety, making that one of the strongest safety duos in the league. They have On the edge, Zadarius Smith now with Danielle Hunter, making that one of the strongest edge duos in the league. So they're really strong at multiple defensive positions, but they do lack at others. Like they're not very strong in the interior outside of Dalvin Tomlinson. They're not very strong at corner, mixed with unproven young guys with older past prime vets. So the Vikings defense, I think, has parts that are really awesome, but also has parts that are pretty weak, which causes them to rank in at number 24. At number 23, I have the New York Jets defense. The Jets defense, I think, has also been pretty weak at times in the past couple of years, but has also shown some resurgence, and I think they'll continue to do so in 2022. You start off with Robert Saleh, who, while I have questions on as a head coach, is a pretty good defensive schemer. They are very strong in the middle with Franklin Myers and Quinnen Williams. The edge position, Carl Lawson and Johnson, who they drafted, that's not bad. The linebacker position with Williams and Mosley, not great, but not terrible. The safety position, even with Joyner and Whitehead, isn't all that bad. The corner position is where I think this team lacks. I think this team is not very strong at corner. They do have Sauce Gardner, but outside of him, there's just not much there, which weakens this defense. But overall, it's a pretty good defensive scheme with a very strong, I think, defensive line. So the Jets defense comes in at number 23 and climbing. At number 22, I have the Las Vegas Raiders defense. The Raiders defense, I think, is kind of underrated entering the 2022 season. First of all, they weren't all that bad of a defense last season against the pass and run. They ranked fairly highly on a pure play basis in both facets of the game. And I think they have gotten stronger in areas. Like they pair Max Crosby with Chandler Jones. That's one of, if not the best edge duos in the league. The interior is not very strong in the defensive line, but the corner core with Nate Hobbs in there, they have added some depth to it. I don't think that's completely terrible. Perryman and Brown I really like at linebacker. And Moehrig has shown some potential at safety. Now Abram has not, so that could be a concern. But I think, Patrick Graham is a pretty good defensive coordinator who they are replacing Gus Bradley with, and I like that. So I think the Raiders defense could be a little better than you think. I think they've got the edge duo to take over games and a better defensive scheme than you think. At number 21, I have the Kansas City Chiefs defense. The Chiefs defense did lose Tyrann Mathieu this offseason, who was a stalwart and superstar of that defense for a couple years there. But I think they've gotten deeper and more athletic and overall a little better, actually, this offseason. You look at the defensive line. Karlaftis is added in. Dunlap is added in. They still have Frank Clark, who's a starting caliber edge rusher, and of course you have Chris Jones. That makes the edge duo and interior defensive line at least solid. The cornerback room. Fenton is actually pretty decent. Even though he's not a big name, he's actually pretty solid. Snead has shown some things in the past, especially in his rookie year. And McDuffie I like at nickel. That's not a bad corner core. Now, it's not great, not proven, but I like it a bit. I like the safety duo of Reed and Thornhill. I like the linebacker in Bolton, but I don't know what to really expect from Gay because he hasn't shown me much. And I really love Steve Spagnuolo, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL and has been for a couple years now, and I don't think gets enough credit. But this defense, for me, is a bit underrated, just like the Raiders, because they have a couple stars, especially Chris Jones, but they also have, I think, more depth and are deeper than I think people would expect, especially at that defensive line position. At number 20, I have the Dallas Cowboys defense. I think the Dallas Cowboys defense was a weird unit last season because they didn't rank particularly highly in many statistical categories, except turnovers, which they were great at generating last year and I think made their defense better than it actually was. And that kind of unsustainable turnover luck makes me look at the talent and say, how great is this defense really? Now, Parsons I love at linebacker. I think he's a stud, and I think Van Der Esch is pretty solid too, which is why I do rate their linebacker core pretty highly. I also really like the safety duo of Kearse and Hooker. I think that's very strong. I think the edge duo, I like Lawrence a lot. I'm not sure about Armstrong, though. The interior defensive line is pretty weak. The corner core, you You've got Diggs, Brown, and Lewis. That's just all right. I like Dan Quinn as a coordinator defensively, not as a coach, obviously, but I like him as a defensive coordinator. So I think the Cowboys defense has, again, areas that I like, areas I don't like, but I just don't see them generating the same amount of turnover luck, which would put them towards the top 10. I think right now they're solid at number 20. At number 19, I have the New England Patriots defense. The Patriots defense was one of the best defenses in football last season, but I do think they've regressed this offseason and has caused them to fall back to 19. Now, let's start with the great. I love Bill Belichick as a defensive mind still, so I give them the respect of a 7 out of 7 there. I love their safety trio. I love Duggar. I love McCourty. I love Adrian Phillips. I love all those guys. I think that's a really good safety trio. But other than that, I think it's a pretty weak unit to just average. I think Barmore's great inside. I'm not sure about the rest of the unit. I don't think Guy's that great. I love Matt Judon on an edge. Again, I'm not sure about the rest of the edge position. I think the linebacker duo of Bentley and McMillan is pretty weak, if I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if either of those guys are above average linebackers. And the corner core no longer has J.C. Jackson, which leaves them without a real number one corner on the outside, which is a worry. Now, I like Jonathan Jones at nickel, but you need an outside corner, especially with how much man they have played. Now, I think they are transitioning more to a zone scheme, but still, I think that corner core is certainly weaker than it was last season. So, the Patriots defense, I certainly think has regressed to number 19. At number 18, I have the New York Giants defense. The Giants defense I expect to be improved this season under new defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, who I think is one of the best and has been my favorite defensive schemer in the NFL for a couple seasons now. I love Wink Martindale, and I give them a 7 out of 7 for scheme, just out of respect for him. Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams is an awesome interior defensive line. Now, Thibodeau and Ujulari, we'll see. They're both very young players. Thibodeau is literally a rookie at edge, but both have potential to be very good. The linebacker core is pretty weak, but Martinez and Crowder aren't absolutely abysmal. The corner core, I don't know what to make of because I really like Adoree Jackson, but I'm not sure past that. The safeties, McKinney I love, we'll see. So the defense, the talent, I love the interior defensive line. I see spots that I like at other positions, like I love McKinney, as I said, Adoree Jackson, and I think the edge duo has potential. But I think Wink Martindale will put those guys in a position to succeed, and I do think this defense could be better than you think this season. So at number 18, I have the New York Giants defense. At number 17, I have the Cleveland Browns defense. The Browns defense is interesting entering the 2022 season, to say the least. I think their offense is definitely getting a lot more talk for many reasons as much, but I think their defense is legitimately pretty good. I think the edge position for them, of course, you have Myles Garrett, one of the best edges in the league. You've also got Jadeveon Clowney, who I'm not sure what to completely make of this season, but he's certainly a player that has potential to be pretty solid, at least. The interior defensive line is not very strong with Elliott and Bryan. But the linebacker core, Walker, I think, is a bit underrated, and Owusu Koramoah is actually pretty good. He was in his rookie year for sure. This cornerback core, I think, is awesome with Ward, Newsome, and Williams. The safety duo of Johnson and Delpit is also pretty good. But the defensive scheme, I do think, lets them down a bit. I'm not a huge fan of Joe Woods. I thought he underachieved a bit last season given the talent that was on this defense. So we'll see what happens there. But the Browns defense certainly has the talent to be in the top 15 next season. At number 16, I have the Denver Broncos defense. The Broncos were a defense last season that was a top 10 unit pretty handily last season, but I do think they've taken a step back. I think the loss of Vic Fangio is a big one, and one that I think will set this unit back a bit. But talent-wise, they're still very talented. You look at DJ Jones added into the interior. They added Randy Gregory along with Bradley Chubb, giving them one of the better defensive lines in football. The secondary is very good. Surtain, Williams, Darby, Jackson, Justin Simmons. They're set really at both corner and safety. The linebacker core is not very strong, I'll say that. But overall, this defense has the talent to be higher than 16. Just for me right now, The question I have about this team's scheme causes them to fall back to number 16 because I do think scheme's very important, and I do think Vic Fangio elevated some of these players. So I wouldn't be stunned if the Broncos were a bottom half defense, but equally wouldn't be stunned if they were in the top 10 again. So number 16, I have the Denver Broncos defense. At number 15, I have the Carolina Panthers defense. The Panthers defense, again, just like the Broncos, I think is a bit held back by scheme. I think their scheme's a little better, though, because it's more proven. But talent-wise, it's really good. Their interior defensive line of Brown and Ioannidis, I don't consider either elite, but I consider both good. So that gives them a 4 out of 5 there. I love Burns. I'm not sure about Gross Matos as the other edge position. I think losing Reddick does hurt them there a bit. The corner core is interesting because Jackson's been solid. Horn was very good before injury last season. They have potential there. Even Henderson's been good in the past, but I'm not completely sure about that unit, so that's why I only give them a 3 out of 5, even though I think they could be better than that. I love Shaq Thompson in the middle. Wilson's all right. He's whatever. Woods and Chin at safety, I like both of those players. I don't love either of them, though. So this defense is pretty much just good, kind of across the board. It's just not really elite, and they have a good scheme, but it's not really elite. So at number 15, I have the Carolina Panthers defense. At number 14, I have the Cincinnati Bengals defense. The Bengals defense, to me, was all right last season. Played better in the playoffs than I think most would have expected, but I think has gotten better. So you look at the defense this season. The defensive line, Reeder and Hill in the middle, both good players, especially Reeder. That gives them a 4 out of 5. Hendrickson's a stud on the edge. They've also got Hubbard, who's pretty solid for them there. The corner position, the Awuzi's pretty good. Hilton's pretty good. Eli Apple's a meme, so that holds them back a bit. But the cornerback room's all right. It's not terrible. Logan Wilson's a good linebacker. Jermaine Pratt's been a starter in this league. He's fine. At safety, Bates and Bell are awesome. That's a great safety duo. The scheme isn't great, granted, because I did think they got exposed a little at the end of that Super Bowl. I thought they weren't doing enough against Cooper Kupp. But I thought the Bengals defense proved a lot last season in the playoffs. And I know the Bengals offense, I ranked it number 1. It gets all the hype for this team. It gets, whenever someone talks about the Bengals, they always talk about the offense and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those great players, and rightfully so, but don't sleep on this defense. I think this defense is going to be pretty good this season. So number 14, I have the Cincinnati Bengals defense. At number 13, I have the Philadelphia Eagles defense. The Philadelphia Eagles defense, simply looking at the defensive line, is the best unit in football. They have the best interior defensive line in the league. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Davis. Absolutely loaded. Nobody's going to be able to run on this team in the interior. The edge position has guys like Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick, among others. I mean, this defensive line is absolutely loaded. The linebacker core has improved a bit, but is still not great. The corner core, I do believe, lacks depth, but I like the duo of Bradbury and Slay. I think that's a pretty good duo. The safety duo of Epps and Harris is all right. It's nothing special, and I'm not a huge fan of the scheme. So that lowers them from being a top 10 unit for me because they're mediocre at the rest of the positions. But on the defensive line, this is a dominant unit. So don't sleep on the Eagles' defense this year either, because they are so good on that defensive line that alone may just vault them into the top 10. So at number 13, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. At number 12 of the Los Angeles Rams defense. Now, the Rams defense 2 seasons ago was the best defense in football. Last season in the playoffs was amazing. They did lose Von Miller, though, so that does hurt them, but they still have Aaron Donald, who is the best defensive player and player in football. And as long as they have him, they're pretty much fine. Outside of him, though, they're really good in the interior defensive line. You look at Greg Gaines and A'Shawn Robinson, who provided more of an interior pass rush for them and made them basically unstoppable or impossible to run on last season, especially late in the year. They did lose Von Miller, as I said, but Leonard Floyd is still there at edge. But there's not a ton of depth there, which hurts them, puts them only at a 3 out of 6 for me. Jalen Ramsey, the best corner in the game. I do think they got a little deeper there, but there's still not much depth there proven, so that holds them back a bit. I like their safety duo of Scott and Fuller, but they're not overly talented. And they added Bobby Wagner, who's still a really awesome linebacker, but they don't have a ton past him. But they did make what previously was a weakness into something of a strength. So at number 12, I have the Rams defense. The one thing I will say as well, positively, Raheem Morris, great defensive coordinator. So at number 12, I have the Los Angeles Rams defense. At number 11, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The Steelers defense has some awesome players. I mean, awesome. TJ Watt, the best edge in the league. Cameron Hayward, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. They have Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in the league. But other than that, they really are lacking, in my opinion. Now, the linebacker position is all right with Myles Jack now there. Devin Bush, I expect to have a better season because he was really poor for them last season. The edge duo, they don't have a ton behind TJ Watt, but because he's so good, I do give them credit for that. Alualu's a very good player in the interior, so that helps them there. But the cornerback core is not very strong. Cam Sutton in the nickels, okay. Levi Wallace is a mid-tier CB2 at best. And Ahkello Witherspoon's not very good. So the cornerback core is a weakness for sure. They are also inserting a new defensive coordinator this season, which is a bit of a worry. So the Steelers defense has enough elite talent to mark them up as high as 11th, but there's too many question marks for me to put them in the top 10. So at number 11, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. At number 10, I have the Miami Dolphins defense. Now, it must be clarified here, I am aware of the Brian Flores loss, but I really like the talent that this defense has to bring. Now, they already had a good secondary. Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, one of the best CB duos in the league for a while. Not very good with Nick Needham there in the nickel, but Javon Holland really was good for them at safety last season. So I think the secondary is clearly very good. But where I think they've gotten a lot better is the front seven compared to what they were a couple years ago, at least. I mean, Davis and Wilkins is a legitimately very good interior defensive line duo. I mean, Wilkins is very good. Davis is all right. Phillips and Ogba is an awesome edge duo. And Baker has emerged as one of the better linebackers in the league. Roberts isn't great as the second guy, but he's not awful. So this defense, talent-wise, it's one of the best starting 11s defensively in the league. Now, the scheme, I'm aware, is unproven, so I'm not going to completely overrate them just based on their talent because, as I said, I do very highly value scheme. But this defense, to me, Miami, is one of the most talented defensive units in the league and comes in for me at number 10. At number 9, I have the Tennessee Titans defense. It seems like so long ago, but it was just 2 years ago. The Titans defense was one of the worst in the NFL. That is far from the case today. The Titans defense is one of the strongest units really in the NFL. I look at this Titans defense, it's very strong in the middle with Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry. It's very strong on the edge with Harold Landry and Bud Dupree. Not as strong in the middle, or as on the edge as it is in the middle, but it's still pretty strong. The quarterback core is solid with Fulton and Farley and Molden. Now, I would like to see more from the latter two, but Fulton makes them at least all right. The linebacker duo of Cunningham and Long is very good, and the safety duo of Hooker and Byard is very good. The scheme's all right, I think. So the Titans defense was one of the better units in the NFL actually last season. They were ranked 10th in yards per drive, which is, to me, pretty impressive. In points per drive, they ranked 11th. So that's pretty solid. And this year, I expect them to be very strong against the run, be good against getting to the quarterback. Not sure what to expect in the secondary, though. But overall, I think the Titans defense is going to be very strong and comes in at number 9. At number 8, I have the Baltimore Ravens defense. The Ravens defense was ravaged by injuries last season and still managed to be one of the stronger defenses in the league, which is really surprising to me, but also very impressive and speaks to how good of a job Wink Martindale did. They're replacing Wink Martindale with Mike McDonald, the Michigan defensive coordinator last season, and someone who has worked with the Ravens in the past. So I'm not too worried about the scheme change there, as he's experienced with this team. The secondary is awesome. You look at Humphrey and Peters, and now Fuller in the nickel, along with Williams and Clark at safety. I mean, this secondary is one of the best, if not the best, in football. The linebacker core is not very strong, but I look at the defensive line as a bit underrated. I like Pearson and Campbell in the middle, even though they're older, they're still good at stopping the run. And I think the edge duo, Bowser and Odafe, not awful, not great, but they do have a little bit of depth there to give them more than a one at that position. So the Ravens defense is very good, and I believe is a top 10 unit at number 8. At number 7, I have the Indianapolis Colts defense. The Colts defense is one of the best in football because there aren't many weaknesses to it. I think the weakest position they have is edge, but even there you've got Kwity Paye, who had a pretty solid rookie season, and they added Yannick Ngakoue, who was pretty good for the Raiders last season. I don't know if they've got quite a number 1 alpha edge, which hurts them a bit, but they've certainly got 2 high-end 2s, which at least gives them a 3 out of 6 for me. They have an awesome interior defensive line with Stewart and Buckner. They have the best linebacker duo in the league with Shaquille Leonard now and Bobby Okereke. The safety duo may be the other unit of concern because Cross isn't great. He's just okay, and Blackman's okay to pretty good, but that's not a bad unit, I don't think. The corner position now with Stephon Gilmore, they add him in. They already had Kenny Moore, who's good in the slot. So that's a strong position. And the scheme now with Gus Bradley, I also think is pretty strong. Is he quite as good as Matt Eberflus? I don't know, but he's good. He was pretty good for the Raiders last season when they weren't playing the Chiefs. So the Colts defense is one of the best in football without many flaws and comes in for me at number 7. At number 6, I have the San Francisco 49ers defense. The 49ers defense is awesome. You look at their edge duo, Bosa and Ebukam. That's a really strong duo. They've got good depth there as well. Armstead's pretty good in the middle, but I'm not in love with what they've got behind him, so that only gives them a 3 out of 5. I do think Kinlaw could have a better season than people think, though. Linebacker duo, Warner and Greenlaw, best in the league, one of them at least. The corner trio with Denard added in, they've got Mosley, and they've added in Charvarius Ward, is improved. It's not great, but it's all right at least now. It's better than it was last season. The safety duo is weaker. Hufanga is not as good as Jaquiski Tart was. They still do have Jimmy Ward, though. So that is still good for them. And, of course, D'Amico Ryan's one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, has actually proven, I thought, last season to be even better than Robert Saleh was. And Robert Saleh was good enough to get a head coaching job. So the 49ers defense, one of the best in football. I just think in certain areas is not quite as strong as some others, which just keeps them out of my top 5 at number 6. At number 5, I have the Los Angeles Chargers defense. Now, I know what you're saying. It's too early. You can't trust the Chargers. They haven't shown it. They weren't good last year. I get all that. I also do not care. I think the Chargers defense is awesome. I think they have the best edge duo in the league by far, with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, 2 of the 6 best edge guys in the league, in my opinion. The linebacker core isn't great, but Tranquill and Murray have both shown to be pretty good at times in this league, so it's not one of the worst in the league by any means. Nasir Adderley is a solid starting safety, and Derwin James is the best safety in the league for my money. The interior defensive line has gotten better with the addition of Sebastian Joseph-Day. They have a great defensive schemer with Brandon Staley, one of the best defensive minds in the league right now. And at corner, they now have J.C. Jackson, one of the best corners in the league, Asante Samuel Jr., a promising player who had a pretty solid rookie season, all things considered, and Bryce Callahan, one of the best nickel corners in the league. This defense is stacked, guys. I don't know what you want me to say. Just look at the depth chart, look at who's coaching them. This is one of the 5 best defenses in football. At number 4, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. The Bucs defense was absolutely, positively elite just 2 seasons ago, before, even though statistically playing pretty well last season, I thought taking a fairly big step back last season. Part of that, though, was due to injuries. You look at the defense this year, though, and I think it's once again very talented. I think Vita Vea and Hakeem Hicks in the middle make them one of the strongest run defenses in the league. I think they've gotten more athletic on the defensive line. JPP last year was just not doing it for them. They add in Joe Tryon, a promising second-year edge rusher, along with Shaq Barrett, one of the best edge rushers in the league. So I think they'll be more athletic against the run, on top of being very hard to run on in the middle. And this run defense was, I thought, a bit disappointing for them last season. So I expect that to be better. I think Lavonte David is one of the best linebackers in the league, has been for years now. But Devin White, I expect to have a better season this year because he was great in 2020, but he was not last season. I expect better from him this season with more of a chip on his shoulder. Secondary is where this team has really improved, though. The corner positions is one of the better positions in the NFL, with Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, a very good to elite cornerback duo, two of the 15 best guys in the league at that position, along with Murphy Bunting, who's had success for them in the past in the nickel. And you look at the safety position, Logan Ryan, experienced vet they add in, along with Antoine Winfield, one of the best safeties in the league. So this defense, coached by Todd Bowles, one of the best defensive schemers in the league, should be back to near its best of 2020, and I think will be, and comes in for me at number 4. At number 3, the Green Bay Packers defense. The Packers defense was good last season, but I feel has significantly strengthened this year and potentially could be the offset to what will be a declining offense this season. You look at the defensive line for this team. Rashawn Gary, an absolute stud on the edge, along with Preston Smith, a very good number 2. They have Kenny Clark, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL, along with Dean Lowry in the interior for now, but I do think Devontae Wyatt will come in for that eventually, giving them more depth in that position. The defensive line is stronger than I think it was last season in the interior. I think the corner trio is awesome. Jair Alexander, one of the best guys in the league. Rasul Douglas, a very good player last season for them. Maybe won't be quite as good as he was last year, but Jair coming back will more than make up for that. And they've got Eric Stokes, who was good last year and is only getting better. At safety, they did lose Darnell Savage today to an injury, but I expect him to be back. They also have Adrian Amos there, who's very good for them. So that's a pretty good safety duo. And Devontae Campbell, linebacker, absolute stud. And they added in Clay Walker, a sideline-to-sideline athletic player from Georgia, who I expect to be an instant contributor for them. The Packers don't have the deepest defense in the league, but in terms of the starting 11, I think it's the best in football, and certainly has a chance to be the best in football this season. I have them coming in as the number 3 defense entering the 2022 NFL season. At number 2, I have the New Orleans Saints defense. I think the Saints defense is a touch better scheme-wise than the Packers, and a touch deeper, which is why I give them a slight edge, but it is very close between the two elite units. The Saints defense is awesome. You look at the middle, that's probably the weakness, with Onyemata there, who's very good. Tuttle isn't great. He's an all-right secondary interior defensive lineman, so that knocks them down to just a 3 out of 5 there. But you look at the edge position, Jordan and Davenport is an awesome edge duo. Their corner trio of Lattimore, Adebo, Gardner-Johnson, that is very good. Their linebacker duo with Davis, one of the best linebackers in the league, and Pete Werner, who I think is pretty underrated there, was at least last season, is very good. And you look at the safeties now with Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, that's a great safety duo. So the Saints defense has as much talent as anyone. Now with Dennis Allen still there, they have one of the best schemes, have for a while. So I think the Saints defense is safely one of the best in the league and could very well be the best by the end of next season. And at number 1, the best defense in the league entering the 2022 NFL season, according to me, is the Buffalo Bills defense. Now, it's rare that you see a team that was the number 1 defense last year also repeat that. The Ravens might have done that a couple times in the 2000s, but for the most part, it's pretty rare. And maybe that's not going to happen with the Bills, but talent-wise, I think the Bills are a rare case of a best defense in the league actually getting a little better, because I think they have improved talent-wise this offseason on the defensive side of the ball from already being the best defense in the league, at least certainly when Tre'Davious White was healthy last year. And let's start with the cornerback position. Kaiir Elam added in the draft. Tre'Davious White, one of the best corners in the league, coming back. Taron Johnson's all right in the nickel. He's not amazing, but he's fine there. He fits their role pretty well. One of the best corner trios in the NFL, that is for sure. They have an excellent safety duo with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, still, even as their advanced age is coming a little bit here, but both are still very good players. Milano is awesome at linebacker. Edmonds is okay for what he does, I think, so that gives them some credit there to 2 out of 3, even though he's not very good at coverage. The interior defensive line, I think, has gotten stronger between Ed Oliver's improvement last season and the addition of Daquan Jones. It's gotten better. And I also look at the edge position now with Von Miller coming in, one of the best edge players in the league still, even at his age. Along with now they have Gregory Rousseau entering his second year. Hopefully he improves there. And they've got more depth at that position as well than they have in years past. I think this is one of the deepest edge kind of edge rush rooms they've had, I guess, because they now also have AJ Epinesa in there. They've got a pretty decent overall edge room there. So I like where the Bills defense is at talent wise, but what really makes the difference is that scheme. Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, an excellent head coach and defensive coordinator combination for the defensive side of the ball. I think the Bills defense is the strongest unit entering the 2022 NFL season. Please make sure again to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL content. And make sure to follow my social medias in the description. Comment below who you think the best defense in the NFL is. And with all of that said, God bless.